Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to call to order the Military Personnel Subcommittee of the Armed Services Committee. We welcome our witnesses this afternoon. We will have some complications in this hearing because there will be a series of 5 votes that the House will be taking, so we will recess for a period of time and then come back. Hopefully, we'll be able to get through the first panel. The taxpayers spent more than $50 billion each year on the military health system, which provides health care services to 9.6 million beneficiaries, including service members, dependents, and retirees. This sizable investment should buy timely, safe, high-quality care for our service members and their families. However, I'm not convinced that the military is delivering on this sacred obligation. The 2017 NDAA reorganized the military health system and standardized clinical quality processes. Before the reform, the Army, Navy, and Air Force each operated separate healthcare systems, and the military had 24 different policies on patient safety and quality. Now, the Defense Health Agency oversees all medical treatment facilities, and since 2019, DoD has a single policy on patient safety and quality. But despite these changes, I have not seen evidence that real improvement has occurred. In fact, I hear too often about medical errors that cause grievous harm to patients and quality assurance investigations that drag on for years while the suspect providers continue to practice. Our first witnesses include 2 families that have been irreparably and devastatingly harmed by inexcusably poor military health care. I want to thank you for coming forward and sharing your deeply personal stories. You are representing yourselves, your families, and countless others who could not be here today. I want to hear from you and how you and your families were treated during and after your medical ordeals. Our first witness is Des Del Barba. He had a dream to follow his family in service to his country. Instead, he found a toxic environment in basic training where he became very ill. The command repeatedly ignored his symptoms and shamed him. When he finally got medical treatment, misdiagnosis and inexplicable additional delays in treatment resulted in an unimaginable set of circumstances for what was a healthy 21-year-old. 43 surgeries, loss of a leg, and loss of a dream for a career in the military. This injury didn't happen in combat. It didn't even happen during training. Instead, it happened because providers failed to act in a timely manner. I also want to recognize Mr. Derek Lucky, whose 19-year-old daughter, Danielle, died in 2016 after the Navy failed to diagnose her condition while she was aboard the aircraft carrier USS Reagan. Her symptoms were also repeatedly ignored, and she paid the ultimate price. I cannot tell you how grateful I am that you are both here to share your stories. You two represent countless victims of poor quality medical care, and I thank you. Our GAO witness, Ms. Sillis, will shed light on whether the Defense Health Agency is adhering to its own clinical quality management procedures, including provider credentialing, investigating medical errors, and holding accountable providers who fail to meet the standards of care. When our service members suffer from poor quality medical care, when doctors fail to provide the standard of care or woefully ignore symptoms or conditions, we need to make sure that there is a system in place to both prevent the incident from happening again and hold the providers accountable. And that's what we want to hear about from the second panel. To Lieutenant General Place and the Surgeon General of the military departments, we want to know, how are you holding incompetent and negligent providers accountable? How are you implementing changes to improve patient safety, both in the military hospitals and in operational medical environments, including ships? How are you making sure the doctors and nurses have the appropriate credentials to provide health care? In our country, we rightfully revere service members for their bravery and their sacrifice. It is incomprehensible and shameful that we cannot ensure they have the quality medical care they deserve. I also want to point out that my efforts to allow service members to file claims against the military for instances of medical malpractice aren't only a matter of justice, they are about accountability. And I'm frustrated, to say the least, that the DoD has been so slow to implement the Stayskal Act that Congress included in the 2020 NDAA. There are few incentives better than the threat of legal action to push an organization to change its behavior. Before hearing from our first panel, we want to hear from Ranking Member Gallagher and give him an opportunity to make his opening remarks.
Well, I thank the chairwoman, and I want to thank both of our panels for being with us today, and a special thank you to Mr. Lucky and Mr. Del Barba for your willingness to share your personal stories and experiences in an effort to help us make the system better. In preparing for this hearing, I looked at some statistics from the National Institutes of Health and found that approximately 400,000 hospitalized patients experience some type of preventable harm each year, and that medical errors cost approximately $20 billion a year, and that medical errors, furthermore, in hospitals and clinics result in approximately 100,000 people dying each year. Within the Department of Defense, a 2014 review found that, quote, while the military health system delivers safe, timely, and quality care that is largely comparable to care delivered in the civilian sector, the MHS demonstrated wide performance variability, with some areas better than civilian counterparts and other areas below national and DoD benchmarks. I understand that reforms in the NDAA, as well as the internal process improvements of DoD, are making a positive impact, but the bottom line is that the military health system is not where we need it to be. One thing that I believe can be done is to attack that variation at every turn, whether it's in the operating room, in the clinic, or on the battlefield. There are many examples within the military of high reliability organizations that focus on eliminating variation and planning until service members can't get it wrong. These organizations empower meritocratic ideals that teach us that every person has an important role on the team based on their performance and their professional acumen. Some examples include military aviation, nuclear propulsion, and special warfare communities. I'd also like to add, although not the focus of today's hearing, that wargaming is actually another way to evolve our military culture in eliminating variation and a never-ending quest to defeat our adversaries. And sometimes we focus so much on the high-end weapon systems, we forget that healthcare is part of our ability to be ready to deter and, if necessary, win our nation's wars. So I am really looking forward to better understanding the challenges the military health system has today, how we can embrace that high reliability organizational culture, and any recommendations that we should be thinking of as we gear up for another NDAA cycle in order to ensure that our outcomes are better than they are today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. I ask unanimous consent to allow members not on the subcommittee to participate in today's hearing and be allowed to ask questions after all subcommittee members have been recognized. And we welcome Mr. DeSagne, and I believe Mr. Westrup is here, Dr. Westrup is here as well. I ask unanimous consent that the chair be authorized to declare a recess at any time. Is there objection? Without objection, it is ordered. Each witness will have the opportunity to present his or her testimony, and each member will have an opportunity to question the witnesses for 5 minutes. We respectfully ask the witnesses to summarize their testimony in as close to 5 minutes as you can. Your written comments and statements will be made part of the hearing record. With that, Mr. Des Del Barba, you may make your opening statement. You have to push that little button there to turn on the microphone. I don't think it's on yet.
Hello? Okay. I apologize.
That's all right.
Thank you, Congresswoman Spear. My name is Des Del Barba. Before I begin, I'd first like to thank Chairwoman Jackie Spear and everyone on the subcommittee for allowing me to speak before you all today and tell my story. I'd also like to thank my parents, Comnie and Mark Del Barba, and my girlfriend, Julie Ruiz, for being here with me today from the very beginning. I'd also like to thank my sister, Drissa Del Barba, who is unable to attend, and lastly, my legal team, Daniel Maharaj and Elizabeth Zwibble, for supporting me throughout this journey. Many people have dreams and aspirations of having a career in tech, medicine, engineering, and law. I had dreams and aspirations of having a career in the U.S. military, and it was something I knew I always wanted to do from a very young age. I wanted to join the military right out of high school. However, I was guided to pursue a bachelor's degree first before getting commissioned as an officer. I was an extremely healthy and athletic 21-year-old man before I enlisted in the U.S. Army. I never had any health issues besides I've never had any health issues besides an ACL tear on my right knee. The Army is the only branch that makes it a requirement for their officers to complete basic combat training before they can attend officer candidate school. I was accepted into the OCS program as I had a few semesters of college left to finish before obtaining my degree. I decided to take a leave of absence from college to complete basic combat training, return to school, then upon graduation from college, attend OCS. I shipped out to Fort Benning on January 7th, 2019, and like many young men and women, I was excited, energetic, enthusiastic, and even anxious for this new adventure in my life. I was assigned to Bravo Company, 1st Battalion, 46th Infantry Regiment. However, it only took 35 days for the military to destroy my life. I was left grossly neglected by the U.S. military healthcare system and by my basic training leadership at Fort Benning, Georgia. As a result of the neglect I experienced, I have physically endured a total of 43 surgeries. Over half of my right glute has been debrided and skin grafted. Both of my underarms have undergone debridement and skin grafting. I have an above-knee amputation on my left leg, while my right leg has been severely debrided and skin grafted, leaving me with 70% muscle and tissue damage. In order to somewhat restore these 5 major areas of my body, I had skin donor sites on my chest and back. Mentally, I'm now diagnosed with severe PTSD and depression. Today, as I sit in front of you all, 3 years and 19 days have passed since I have answers about what has happened since I contracted necrotizing fasciitis at Fort Benning. It's been 1,143 days, and I still have no clear answers on the status of any quality assurance investigation that may or may not have been initiated promptly. What happened to me did not have to happen. This was preventable. I can sit here and speak all day about what happened to me, but my pictures will put my words into perspective of the damage that has been done to my body and my mind. Please see the attached photos for a better understanding of what I went through and what could have been avoided had the medical providers at Fort Benning given me adequate medical attention. If I was your son, if I was your brother, if I was your loved one, would you sit stagnant waiting for answers? I would hope not. You would fight for their rights, and you would never stop until the questions are answered and the responsible people are held accountable. I understand that the medical quality assurance is managed by the military medical community. I understand that this takes time and patience. However, my medical records from Fort Benning total less than 100 pages, and I cannot seem to understand or comprehend how the Army has taken over 3 years and still has not concluded the QAI in my case. I have enclosed with my statement all the correspondence I have received from the Army Command regarding the status of my QAI for the committee to see how convoluted this process has been and how inconsistent the Army is when responding to inquiries made. I would pose the question, how can the military say it is adequately providing medical quality assurance for service members like myself? I'm here today not only fighting for myself, but for all other service members that have been subjected to an adverse event at a military treatment facility center and have never had a proper or appropriate quality assurance investigation. This is a grave injustice for our service members, and this is the least that they deserve given that some of them are no longer here as a result. I cannot stress the negative emotional impact this has caused on myself. Not only did I lose a limb, I also lost my identity, my self-esteem, and my confidence along with it. Activities that are supposed to be fun and enjoyable for someone in their 20s became a mental burden. Hiding behind a fake smile every time I am around others while having feelings of true unhappiness on the inside became normal. Having thoughts of, it would be better if I just went to sleep and never woke up, was something I was hoping would happen to me every single night before bed. As the saying, life goes on, my life will go on. I will eventually find the strength mentally and physically to work past this horrendous time in my life. However, this has reshaped my identity as a human being. Daily things that you all take for granted, such as putting on your shoes before work, taking a walk around your neighborhood, going for a dip in the pool when it's too hot outside. These are all things that I'm not able to do either at all or as easily anymore as a 24-year-old man. I would never wish what I went through upon anyone, but unfortunately may not be possible, seeing that those responsible for the poor medical care I received are still employed by the Army to treat more service members. I ask you to take away the feeling of motivation from what I have shared here with you today, the motivation to want a better system that should be at its finest for its men and women who want to serve this country. Thank you for your time and attention, and please see my written statement for a full accounting and timeline of what happened to me. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Del Barba. Extraordinary courage that you've shown. I want my colleagues to know that in your binders are pictures of his injuries, and they are truly shocking. Mr. Lucky, you're recognized.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Could you make sure your microphone's on?
Good afternoon.
I think it's on.
Should light red.
Good afternoon.
Maybe put the microphone a little bit closer. Yes, there you go.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Spear and members of the committee. My name is Derek Lucky. I'm from Pittsburgh, California. I am joined today by my wife, Annette. We are the parents of the late seaman, Danielle Lucky, who died October 10th, 2016, from sepsis while serving on the USS Ronald Reagan. We were invited to appear today to share what happened to Danielle while she served our country. We were invited to appear today to share what happened to Danielle while she served our country. First, let me say I am not a lawyer or a politician. I have never done anything like this before. However, I am here today to share with you the tragedy of Danielle's death. She did not die in combat or any military operation. She died from gross negligence of the medical providers on the ship she served, the USS Ronald Reagan. Her death was very preventable. Instead, she died in excruciating pain instead of being properly treated. When Danielle came to me and said, "Dad, I want to join the military and serve my country," she wanted to join the Navy to start a career as a sailor on a ship. When she approached me, I said, "I am concerned for you." She said, "Dad, I will be okay." With that big smile I remember so much, a smile I will never see again. Little did I know, on October 10, 2016, I would get that knock at the door at 9:03 a.m. telling me my daughter was dead, not from bullets, but from sepsis. Like many who have children who have served in the military, we live in fear of two officers knocking at our door. Danielle was not in combat. We were crushed when they told us she had died of cardiac arrest. We thought it was impossible. How could my daughter die of cardiac arrest? Our lives changed forever. Danielle died on the USS Ronald Reagan, not at war. This tragedy was completely avoidable. Her death was the result of gross negligence, malpractice. If the medical providers on the USS Ronald Reagan had given her a simple treatment of antibiotics instead of turning her away, she would be here today. When we reached out to attorneys around the country to represent us, they said no, that we couldn't do anything. Someone told us to reach out to attorney Natalie Quam. They said she is a strong fighter for our military. We did, and she was willing to help us seek justice for Danielle. Ms. Quam told us that you, Chairman Spear, are an incredible advocate for our military and that you are the champion of the Richard Stayskal Military Accountability Act. So today, I did come here to share with you the tragedy of our daughter's death and to share with you what is wrong with the system you created to seek justice when sailors like my Danielle died when they are victims of medical malpractice. We all believe when Congress passed the SFC Richard Stayskal Military Accountability Act under your leadership, we would finally have justice and accountability for victims like Danielle. Unfortunately, we could not seek justice for Danielle as you, this Congress, has intended and we hoped. Sadly, we learned from our attorneys for military.com that despite your hard work, Chairman Spear and Congress and intense Department of Defense has decided not to allow claims from sailors on vessels or ships like Danielle's. That is not what Congress intended. It is the opposite. I have also learned that they will not allow claims by sailors or soldiers when they are treated at military facilities outside the United States in places like Italy, Germany, and England, where we have big U.S. military hospitals. So just because a military hospital is not in the U.S., the care doesn't have the same medical standard. This is wrong. The DOD issued guidelines that do not align with what Congress intended. Justice for victims of medical malpractice. Worse, I am told if a sailor like Danielle were to file a claim and be denied, the appeal of the denial goes back to the panel made up by either Army, Navy, or Air Force. So the military decides the cases and the appeals. That's like the home team getting to be their own referee in a football game. This is not, it's just not fair what I think you intended. These denials should be heard by an independent federal judge like other federal claims. That would be fair. Chairwoman Spear, the law as written today can't bring justice to Danielle or me or my wife, but you can make changes that would allow for these other problems like the appeal and where the hospital is located be corrected. Without these changes, the military will continue policing themselves. Without these changes, the military will continue policing itself. The military will decide if they are right or wrong, and worse, they will also determine the appeals if someone like me were to lose the case. I urge you to stop this now and correct these problems. I know you and other Congress members care about our military and want them to have the best medical care possible. And when that care causes their death or harm, they should be compensated for the harmful, for that harmful maltreatment. Please make these changes and bring our military and our families justice today. Danielle was robbed of her life and her career. Let her mistreatment and death remind us that our military and families deserve justice now. Please fix the Stayskal Act to work the way you intended to bring justice to victims and their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lucky. Again, this committee mourns with you the loss of your daughter. Ms. Silas, from the General Accountability Office, you are recognized.
Thank you. Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Gallagher, and members of the subcommittee, I am pleased to be here today to discuss GAO's ongoing work reviewing DoD's monitoring of providers' qualifications and competence in military medical facilities. My testimony today summarizes preliminary observations we have developed during the course of our review. DoD provides healthcare to over 9 million beneficiaries through its military health system and employs a variety of physicians, dentists, and other providers that provide a range of healthcare services, from routine examinations to complex surgical procedures. As such, it's imperative that DoD ensure that these providers are delivering timely, quality care to military service members and their families. and then any concerns that may arise about the quality and safety of care being delivered by these providers is immediately addressed. Like other healthcare systems, DoD is responsible for ensuring that their providers deliver safe care to patients. Since the Military Health Systems review of DoD provider quality of care issues in 2014, Congress has required DoD to transfer management of domestic medical facilities from the military departments to DHA. In 2019, DHA issued standardized clinical quality management procedures intended to ensure that individual providers are qualified and competent to deliver safe, high-quality care to patients across all military departments. GAO is currently reviewing procedures that occur under DHA's clinical quality management, credentialing and privileging, focused professional practice evaluations, and the review of potential compensable events, that is, patient safety events that could result in payments to the patient or their families. And generally, we've found a number of instances where facilities and DHA were not adhering to procedures. First, as part of credentialing and assigning clinical privileges to providers, DHA policy requires military medical facilities to verify a provider's qualifications, such as education and licensure, when providers are first onboarded at the medical facility, and then to periodically assess the provider's credentials and privileges thereafter. However, as part of our ongoing review, we have found that the selected facilities were not always following the DHA credentialing privileging procedures. For example, we have learned that facilities were not consistently verifying that all of a provider's medical licenses were valid. In addition, it appears that about 3/4 of the applicable providers, these facilities did not have documentation that ongoing evaluations were conducted every 6 months as required. Second, military medical facilities are also required to conduct focused professional practice evaluations for cause, which are conducted when concerns are raised about a provider's care. Our ongoing review indicates that for the 20 focused evaluations we reviewed, documentation that 2 key requirements, criteria, and metrics were not consistently documented in the focused evaluation plans. Both are important to determining whether the provider has successfully completed the evaluation. Lastly, based on our work today, DHA has not always completed reviews of patient safety events that could potentially result in compensation or did eventually result in payments to the patient or their families. For example, for the 12 cases we identified that did result in payments to patients or their families, for about half of the cases, DHA reviews were not completed within the 270-day requirement. And further, none of these cases were reported as required to HHS's National Repository that contains information on adverse actions taken against the provider and provider medical malpractice payments. Finally, our preliminary observations indicate that DHA does not sufficiently monitor facilities' adherence to its clinical quality management procedures. For example, DHA officials told us they run some reports related to credentialing and privileging from a database, but those reports are pretty limited. Furthermore, the database does not include all required documentation, such as the documents related to the provider ongoing evaluations. We also learned that DHA has not begun monitoring of facilities' implementation of its reviews of potential compensable events. Instead, DHA is focusing on only monitoring compensable events cases that have resulted in payments. As DHA continues to implement its clinical quality management procedures, ensuring DHA policies and procedures are properly adhered to by the military medical facilities can help to ensure that service members, military retirees, and their families receive safe, high-quality care. And when the care does not meet those standards, DHA can hold those providers accountable. We will continue to assess these issues as part of our ongoing work, and we'll plan to make recommendations as appropriate. Thank you. That concludes my prepared statement, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Sillis. We are in the middle of a roll call, but there are still 300 members who haven't voted. So what I'd like to do is give members the opportunity to ask some questions. Mr. Gallagher?
I'll start with Ms. Sides. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Can you tell us more about the shortcomings GAO found in DHA's efforts to monitor medical facilities' adherence to procedures? Why is this important, and what more could DHA be doing to make sure its facilities are adhering to those procedures?
Certainly. So as I mentioned, we looked at 3 different types of procedures. We looked at credentialing, privileging, which we looked at a sample of 100 providers from 4 military treatment facilities. We found instances of where during the credentialing process, the facilities were not always verifying providers' licenses, as I mentioned in my testimony. So for example, a provider could have licenses in multiple states, and we would find that some of the licenses haven't been verified. We also looked at ongoing professional evaluation or practice evaluations, and these are routine evaluations that occur every 6 months. And we found that about 3/4 of the providers did not have documentation that these were even conducted. The other procedures that we looked at were under our focused professional evaluations for cause. We looked at 20 evaluations from the 4 military treatment facilities. And we found, for example, that facilities were rarely documenting all of the required elements that are needed to determine whether or not a provider had successfully met all of the requirements for the evaluation. And then lastly, we looked at patient safety events. We looked at 2 groups of events. We looked at potential compensable events. We identified 19 from the 4 facilities included in our review, and we found 2 issues of non-adherence. One, at the beginning of the review, facilities are supposed to consider taking an adverse privileging action against a provider if the safety events were particularly egregious. And we found that there was no documentation that any consideration was ever taken. We also found that there was issues with kind of meeting the timeframes, the required timeframes for these reviews. The facilities are supposed to conduct these potential compensable event reviews within 180 days of notification that the event had happened. And we found about 80% of those cases were not completed within that required time. We saw that these cases, the days ranged from 91 to 546 days in some instances. For the second group of patient safety events that we looked at, we identified 12 patient safety events that resulted in payments to either the service member or their families. We found that DHA did not complete these reviews for reporting out on these reviews within the required time frame, which was 270 days. We found that about half of the 12 cases were incomplete and exceeded that time frame. But in particular, what we found too is that for those reviews that were not completed within the 270-day time frame, none of those cases or those providers were reported to the National Practitioner Data Bank, which is HHS's repository for information on provider quality care issues. So that if a provider has an adverse privileging action that's taken against them, they would be reported to HHS. And in this instance, there's a requirement within DHA procedures that if these patient safety events that have resulted in payment exceed the 270-day requirement, then they need to be reported to the National Practitioner Data Bank.
Well, thank you. I was going to cede my time to Mr. Jackson, but I'm almost out of it. But we have, I think, 300 people left to vote, so you should have a full 5 minutes if we go. But so in the 50 seconds I have remaining, I just would ask both Mr. Lucky and Mr. Del Barba, what is the single biggest lesson you've learned from this terrible and tragic experience that you've had with the military healthcare system? In either order.
Sir, the military healthcare system does not listen to the needs of the service members. It's that simple. We go and we ask for help and we are denied treatment.
Mr. Lucky.
My daughter shouldn't have to be denied medical. She signed up to serve her country. That's all she wanted was to serve her country. And to be denied medical, that's not right.
Thank you.
And in both of your cases, a simple antibiotic given over a period of 5 to 7 days would have solved the problem, correct?
Yes, correct. And I actually went to sick call and physical therapist a total of 6 times before my body went septic.
And Danielle, she went to medical several times and was turned away. And each time it got worse.
Thank you. Ms. Houlihan, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
I've been struggling with whether or not to even ask my prepared questions, mostly because I just want to say I'm sorry and to express my deep appreciation and gratitude to you all for sharing your stories, and also to your families for being there for your loved ones. And I know how hard this process is and how scary it is to tell your truth. So thank you. I served in the military myself and grew up in a military family, and so I know a few things about military health care. And I would like to understand better, maybe with my one question, from a parenting perspective, from a loved one's perspective, what could we be doing better to better integrate other people from a family into the decision-making process in healthcare and into, frankly, your experience when your daughter unfortunately did pass away and your experience of learning of her healthcare journey. I know that you're an adult. I know that your daughter is an adult, but I'm struck by this need that we have to make sure that we're also including people who may not be physically present in your family, but who might want to be engaged and involved in the healthcare choices and processes that you're going through. So I'd love to know from you all if there's any lessons learned that we can be taking advantage of. Before I let you answer, it's reflective, Madam Chair, of our experience with Vanessa Guillen and her family as well. Different circumstances, but just the same kind of feeling of these are young people who are experiencing medical trauma or trauma in general, and how can we better involve the family members?
Tell us the truth. Don't try to hide. We want to know what happened. It's just not right how they treated my daughter. And me personally, I don't want any other family to have to experience what we're experiencing now. Like I said, this has changed our whole life. Daily functions is difficult. Every day is a difficult day. My daughter should have never been denied medical treatment on the ship she served, the USS Ronald Reagan. That ship is named after the 40th President of the United States, and she wanted to serve on that ship.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Barba.
I think it's just accountability for myself and for other service members. The military isn't accountable for their actions. It's not fair to not only myself, but to my family, putting them through what they went through. It's sad, and it's something that shouldn't happen to anybody. When you're sick and you need medicine, you should not be denied the medicine. You should be taken seriously. I understand there's people in training that try to get out of training and try to fake it, but it should be taken seriously. Every single person should be taken seriously, because most of these people that aren't taken seriously aren't as lucky as I am. They don't have their lives anymore.
No, and this is the thing that I am also struck by is how young you are, how young your daughter was. I want to make sure that we're treating when somebody goes to the doctor, they're going because they're genuinely sick. It should be the going in assumption. And I know that that's not always the case with young people, and particularly people of color specifically. And so I think that's something that we should be very attentive and in tune to. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Texas, Dr. Jackson, is recognized for 5 minutes. And my apologies to Ms. Escobar. You were in line ahead of me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. First off, thank you to the witnesses for being here. Really appreciate your testimony. To you, Mr. Del Barba. I can't tell you how sorry we are for the disability and the way this has changed your life. For Mr. Lucky, our condolences to you and your family. I can't imagine what it's like to have your child taken from you at such a young age like that. Coming from military medicine, having been a military provider, it's horrifying to hear your stories, and I really appreciate you being here and telling us how this goes. I will say that, having come from military medicine, I can say that I think overall, the military does a fairly good job in most aspects with healthcare, but the stories that you tell are unacceptable. They can never happen again if we can prevent this. So we have to do everything we can to figure out how we stop this. I think that practicing military medicine is a very unique environment to practice in, having come from that particular environment. I'll tell you, there's a balance between operational requirements and the medical training and competency that are required that's different than if you were just practicing medicine out in the civilian sector. There are other time constraints and other requirements that you have to factor into your schedule that ultimately and unfortunately take away from some of your ability to provide maybe the best care that you could for patients at times. I think also it's complicated by the fact that in the military, and we all have to watch for this, and I know that the flag and general officers here from our medical community will agree with me on this, that it's difficult in military medicine sometimes to always be thinking about worst case scenario when you're really used to taking care of a very young and healthy population. And we don't see the population of patients that you see in the civilian sector with the very young and the very old and some of the really sick folks and some of the horrible, tragic things that happen to you, Mr. Barba, and to your daughter, Mr. Lucky. Those are things that are more rare in the military practice environment than they are in the civilian practice. But that's on us to figure out how to fix that. That's on us to go out and make sure that we're getting that training out in the civilian sector and that we're exposing ourselves to that type of stuff so that we don't put your family members, your loved ones, in a situation where they're the victims of our inability to recognize those kinds of things. And I will say that there's a little bit of a component on us coming together with the three branches of the military recently, trying to combine and practice as one and learn how to approach things as one organization, not three separate organizations: the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. So, Mrs. Salas, I was going to ask you a question. In your experience, is there any what part of the issues you were discussing earlier with the credentialing issues, the training shortfalls, the lack of quality assurance, things of that nature, how much of that is related to our efforts right now? I mean, we started this effort back in 2012, I think, to bring military medicine under one umbrella with DHA. How much of it is related to the fact that we still have not got there where we got everybody together under one umbrella, and how much is because we're dropping the ball because we have, we don't have clear responsibilities in certain areas?
Thank you for the question. I think it's very much related. I think that, and again, these are all preliminary observations from our ongoing work. The sense that we get from this review is that, one, the facilities generally are not adhering to a lot of the procedures for the, credentialing, provisioning, and the safety events and the focus evaluations, the things that we looked at. The procedures that were, the policies and procedures that were published, I think there's a lack of clarity around those procedures. There's definitely the sense of moving and trying to bring the different military services under DHA. I think there needs to be some clarification around the procedures and the language that's used in there. Some of the facilities were interpreting some of the language and the procedures differently. There was a lack of awareness of some of the different new procedures. I mean, this is 2019 when they were implemented. I think that a lot of the facilities are adjusting to that. I also think, at least at the DHA level, they are really still amping up their monitoring of facilities' adherence to these procedures. They're trying to still ramp up capacity. They are trying to determine what information they need, where that information is located, and then the tools they need to actually conduct the monitoring.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll just close by saying, I do think it is a problem, especially when you're looking at our other providers, our medics, our corpsmen, our physical therapists, our PAs, things of that nature, with them taking care of the mostly healthy young population that we have right now. I know when I was a physician in charge of those types of folks, it was one of my biggest fears that we were going to miss something like that because the mindset wasn't out there looking for it. So we cannot excuse what happened to you and your families. We will try our best to fix this, to make this right. And once again, I really appreciate your time for being here and telling us your story. It makes a really big difference. With that, I yield back, ma'am.
There are still 146 members that haven't voted. Would you like to go forward, Ms. Escobar?
I'd like to.
Ms. Escobar is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I first want to say to Mr. and Mrs. Lucky how incredibly sorry I am for your loss. I cannot imagine what you all have had to endure. To Mr. Del Barba and his family, also so incredibly sorry for what you've endured. And it has taken, I know, tremendous courage to be here in front of us and to tell your story and to hold us accountable. And I really appreciate that you are doing that and that you are here to tell Congress that we need to do something. So we hear you loudly and clearly. I also want to recognize in the audience Myra Guillen, who is the sister of Vanessa, the late Vanessa Guillen. Thank you for being here. She's here with counsel. I have a question for Ms. Silas. Just listening to the litany of issues and the lack of following procedure and the amount of time that it's taken to understand and digest and follow policies and processes, I cannot wrap my head around why that is so. During this whole process, as you were taking a look at all of this, what do you think is behind that? Is it lack of resources? Is it a culture that refuses to change? Is it still too much bureaucracy? What are your thoughts?
I think that there's a couple of things going on. One is this is a massive transition that's happening, and it's going to require not only kind of putting the right procedures in place and the tools that I mentioned, but also it's going to mean a change in culture. And in 2000, it's been a couple of years now, and we have the policies and we have the procedures in place. There definitely needs to be a look at those procedures to ensure that there's some clarity around some of the language that's in there. I think the staff at the facility level is definitely trying to adhere to these procedures as well as they can, but the procedures are not necessarily written as clearly as they could be. And so that's leading to a lot of interpretation. And again, as I mentioned, DHA is still continuing to ramp up their monitoring. One of the things that I think we found in our review is, there's a centralized database, CCQuas, where a lot of the information around credentialing and privileging is supposed to be entered, but it also doesn't contain a lot of information or documentation that's needed for some of the other processes or procedures that are need to be monitored. So I think there's just still a lot of work needed to kind of lay the groundwork in terms of, a centralized data system where information is going to be, information is going to be put, and that DHA in their monitoring understands where that information is and then how to use it.
I appreciate that. It's just mind-boggling that it's taken the federal government this long really to do right by the people who are in our care, should be in our care. Well, a second question about the current malpractice claims process. How can we improve it to better allow for accountability and protections of victims of negligence?
Well, the scope of our current review does not include a review of malpractice claims. The new law that's governing malpractice claims is relatively new, and so there weren't any cases at the time within the scope of a time frame for our review to include them. So I can't really speak directly to that.
It would be interesting to follow, I think, to make sure that we understand going forward whether that is as efficient a process as needs to be, because key to account that is, in my view, a core function of accountability and a way for families to try to achieve some justice. With that, I'm out of time. Thank you all again, especially to the Del Barba family, to the Lucky family. Really appreciate your presence here today. Your testimony was really powerful. Madam Chair, I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. There are 99 persons who have yet to vote, so 69. Oh, I can't read. All right, so we are going to stand in recess. It will probably be a little more than like an hour and 15 minutes because we have a series of votes, and then we will return and continue the questioning. The Military Personnel Subcommittee will reconvene. And Ms. Sillis is back. All right. Ms. Bice is here. Let's see. We left off with Ms. Escobar. We will now go to Ms. Bice from Oklahoma for 5 minutes. Would you like to pass for a moment?
Madam Chair, if that would be okay.
Sure, of course. We'll go to Dr. Westrup.
If you give it 2 seconds.
Okay. All right, Ms. Bice, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And I want to say, first of all, to the Lucky family, my condolences to all of you. I can't imagine getting that knock at the door. So please know that my heart and prayers go out to both of you. And Mr. Del Barba, you and I had the chance to speak briefly. As the mother of a 21-year-old myself, I cannot imagine the suffering that you go through and how traumatic that's been for your parents. And certainly your story is incredibly important for us to all hear so that no other service member has to endure the type of pain that you have endured over these last months and years. Before we I ask a couple of questions, I think, to Ms. Silas, I do want to ask, can you talk a little bit about your recovery from the infections that you had?
Yes, of course. So I was in the ICU at Fort Sam Houston, Brooke Army Medical Center for 100 days. I did have 43 surgeries. I was discharged from the hospital in May towards around Memorial Day weekend. I learned how to walk on a prosthetic, did a lot of strength training and stuff for my leg. It took me until about March, so almost a year, to finally walk and be able to come home to my family and friends. It's the wounds taken over 2 years to heal, and the scars will never look anything like normal ever again in my life, but they're still healing, honestly, to this day. They're still so very fragile, my leg is, and I still go to PT every week for my right leg, as I have nerve damage on my right leg where I can't really walk correctly because of my ankle. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you for that. This question is actually to Ms. Silas. The GAO report stated some facilities which have cases that resulted in payments. Silas, my apologies. The GAO report has stated that some facilities have had cases that have resulted in payments that have exceeded the time required for those reviews. Can you elaborate on the process in which should be implemented to improve the delays? And was Fort Benning included in the review on this GAO report?
Well, first, I can't identify the military treatment facilities that we included in our review. It was something that we negotiated with our clients as part of this review because it's important to have some confidentiality so that folks, the staff that we're talking to, will be forthcoming in the information. So I can say that we did include, of the 4 facilities, 2 of the facilities were on the West Coast and 1 was on the East Coast and 1 was in the South. In terms of the patient safety events that resulted in payment, those reviews are conducted by DHA. Once the military treatment facilities have determined that there hasn't been a standard of care met, DHA has kind of what I call 2 bites of the apple to do some additional reviews. And they have 270 days to conduct these reviews. And what we found, as I mentioned in my testimony, about half of the 12 cases that we included in our review exceeded that 270-day time frame. And the range of days that we found for those cases was from 420 days to up to 746 days. And the clocks for those starts as soon as the payments have been made either to the patient or the families.
And a quick follow-up, you mentioned that you reviewed 4 facilities. Are the rest of these facilities across the country being evaluated in some way, shape, or form, and are they being graded on their performance by these metrics?
Not as part of our review. We limited our review to the 4 selected military treatment facilities.
Why only 4?
We made the selection based on one, limiting it to so that we're able to conduct the review in a reasonable amount of time. We had to look through a number of records to look at all 3 types of procedures. But we did try to ensure that, at least with the providers, we looked at a sample of 100 providers. It was a non-generalizable sample. We took a sample of 25 providers from each of the 4 military facilities. And then for the focused professional evaluations and the patient safety events, we selected the total number of patient safety events that occurred at those 4 facilities.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. My time has expired. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from California, Mr. DeSagne, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the ranking member for having this hearing and being so tenacious, as you always are. Mr. Barba and family, thank you for being here and your courage. Dad, thank you for just telling me your story as well. Mr. Lucky, Derek, thank you, and your wife and your family for having my staff be part of your life. I've talked about this often. So tell me, how long was it before Daniela got sick and when she saw a doctor?
Danielle had been going back and forth to medical, I believe, from 10-3 to from 10-3 to 10-9, she had been going back and forth to medical, and she kept being turned away. And I believe on the day she died, I need a few minutes.
Well, as I remember the story, she was in for 5 months. She was on the ship for 2 weeks, 10 days, 2 weeks.
Yeah, she was on the ship for 2 weeks, and she became sick, and she kept going back and forth to medical for several days until the day she died, and that's when they figured out that she had died, I guess.
Right. So, Danielle, tell my colleagues a story about when she was lying on the ground, and one of the medical shipmates said,
Danielle was trying to get to medical, but the corpsman would not help her. So her sailor brothers and sisters took her to medical because she could no longer walk. And she basically laid on the floor. If that wasn't for her sailor brothers and sisters, that's where she would have died, right there on the floor.
so you've heard from some of her friends who were on that ship. At your house, I was lucky enough to meet one of her best friends. Tell us, their side of the story is not consistent with the Navy side of the story of what happened factually.
Well, I believe Danielle was being evacuated to another destination, but the person who we spoke to saying that they didn't see her get off the aircraft. So basically she died on the Reagan. That's all.
So you mentioned in your opening testimony, and one of the things I think we need to change on this is she was not in a medical facility onshore in the United States of America. So your claim was denied because she was on a U.S. Navy ship. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's one of the things that needs to be changed in this.
That's correct. The Congress intended to bring justice and accountability to military malpractice. However, DOD went and narrowly interpreted your intent by denying all victims that were harmed on ships outside of the U.S. This is not fair.
How did you feel when you found that out? I mean, you sent your daughter out to serve in the military, and then on this, seems like a technicality that makes no sense, you couldn't seek justice.
No, this could have been prevented. This could have been prevented if they would have gave her medical treatment.
Right. But even after that, your ability to seek justice with your attorney.
It's been difficult. It's been very, very difficult.
Do you know of any repercussions to the people who were in the chain of command who denied? Were they promoted? Do they?
I'm pretty sure someone has been, how should I say this? No.
Promoted?
That's correct.
Meh.
I believe a lot of them has been promoted, including the captain of the Reagan, Captain Donnelly. I believe they have been promoted. And the other service members, I believe they may still be in the military to continue their career while my daughter lost her life and her career.
Thank you, Mr. Lucky. My time's up. I yield back. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Ohio, Dr. Wenstrup, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I just want to express my condolences to Mr. Del Barba and the whole, your family and entire Lucky family. I just want to say that I thank you for being here today, and know that the effort will be made from this end as best we can to make sure that all of our troops will always have the right providers in the right places with the right credentials and the appropriate complement of all the tools that they need to treat people at all times. So God bless you all. You're in my thoughts and prayers. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from California, Ms. Jacobs, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I want to thank all the witnesses for being here and telling what are not easy stories to have to relive. And I'm so sorry that you have to keep doing it to get us to take action. Ms. Silas, in a recent GAO report that was published on September 17th, 2018, reported that MHS largely uses separate measures for direct and purchased care on its dashboards and tracks the quality of care delivered by civilian providers and purchased care in the aggregate rather than individually. The MHS lacks the information it needs to make comparable assessments of the quality of care delivered across the MHS as a whole. To your knowledge, is this report still accurate? And what, if anything, has the military health system done to overcome this information gap?
So to my knowledge, I believe that some of the recommendations are still open from that review. I can't speak directly to the particular recommendations, but I am familiar with some of the findings from that report. But I'm glad to take this for the record and get back to you about the status of the recommendations on that and what progress has been made.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And one other question for you is, in reviewing these medical treatment facilities' clinical quality management efforts, has GAO discovered any reasons why facilities are not consistently adhering to DHA procedures?
Yeah, I mean, based on our preliminary observations, again, this work is ongoing. It seems to appear, again, that there's a lack of clarity in the procedures. For example, we found that it's some of the language that's used in there in the procedures is not consistent. There's also a lack of definition. Some of the facility staff had different interpretations of what was initiation of a potential compensable event and what was the end of a potential compensable event review. And then there was just a general kind of lack of awareness and a lack of understanding of the procedures.
Okay, thank you. Well, I will look forward to your answer for the record on my first question. And Madam Chair, I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. I'll now ask questions for 5 minutes. Mr. Del Barba, is it true that at one point you were so depressed that you attempted to take your life?
Yes, November 12th, 2019, which was same year as the accident happened.
And when you were seeking care, your drill sergeant was reluctant to take you. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. So one of my drill sergeants was notified by my peers in the barracks that I was not feeling good and that I needed to go to the hospital. He proceeded to tell this battle buddy that, has he already gone to sick call? And the battle buddy said yes a couple times, and he said, well, there's nothing we can really do. This was 24 to 48 hours before my body went into septic shock.
So if I remember correctly, on Friday, you went to sick call and complained about a sore throat and pain in your legs.
So Thursday, I went to sick call and complained about sore throat and pain in my legs. I was swabbed for strep A. There's 2 types of swabs they do. One comes back rapid test, about 5 to 10 minutes. The other one takes 24 to 48 hours. Rapid test came back negative. The next day, that 24 to 48 hour test came back positive. However, in the system, whoever wrote that note said notify Monday in the morning, and this was on Friday. They waited. They wanted.
But it was in your record at that point.
It was in my record, yes.
And then on Sunday, you went to the ER, and the doctor showed you enough time, 3 minutes, to say that you were fine, and evidently didn't even look at your record because it would have been in your record, correct?
Yes, correct. I went to the ER doctor on Sunday, February, I want to say it was February 10th, excuse me. And I saw the doctor he clocked in and clocked out for 3 minutes. That was the time. And he told me I was fine and that my legs were sore due to the running, and he just prescribed me throat lozenges for my sore throat.
That is such gross incompetence.
Yes.
And it doesn't take a QAI for 3 years to determine that that's gross incompetence. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you also were mistreated by the drill sergeant who forced you to go up the stairs at the hospital. Is that right?
Correct. So, I experienced a lot of bullying and harassment from the drill sergeants. That Sunday when I went to the doctor at sick call, it wasn't the emergency room, but it was up a flight of stairs. My legs did feel like sandbags, and they were hurting. They were in so much pain that I wanted to take the elevator up, but we as privates were advised to take the stairs. So I literally had to have my battle buddy not carry me on my shoulder, but I had to put a lot of weight on his shoulder just to get up those flights of stairs to be seen for 3 minutes by this doctor.
And after you were diagnosed with strep, was there an outbreak?
Yes, correct. So on Tuesday, February 19th, Martin Army Hospital Surgeon General Lieutenant Colonel Ethan Miles contacted my parents. I was in a coma at this time. 56 positive cases in my company, Bravo Company, 405 positive cases in 2 brigades at Fort Benning. Fort Benning requested an order of 10,000 units from Pfizer at the estimated cost of $1.7 million. Pfizer told Fort Benning they only had 60,000 units available for the entire world. Private Christopher Huss, who was also in my company, he died January 22nd due to sepsis. He had a heart attack.
Again, Des, you're a remarkable young man, and this is such a gross disservice to you and your family. And I hope that our colleagues who are here listening to you recognize that there are changes that have to be made. Mr. Lucky, did the Navy ever take responsibility for their failures?
No, not at all.
Did the Navy tell you if they made any changes in response to Danielle's death?
We haven't heard anything from the Navy.
All right, just for the record, Mr. Lucky, there's something called legislative intent. And since I was the author of the legislation, the intention was to recognize that when you're not in a war zone, when you're at a military medical facility, whether it's in the CONUS or if it's in Europe or if you are on a ship, you should be receiving quality care. If there is malpractice associated with that care and you're not in a war zone, then you should be eligible for compensation under the Stayskal Act. That was my intention. That's what passed the House and the Senate and became law. So if we have to clarify that in the NDA this year, we will attempt to do that. Ms.
Yes, thank you.
Silas? Am I pronouncing it right or wrong?
Silas, yes, it's Silas.
Ms. Silas, thank you for your outstanding work. I want to ask you a question. If it's been over 270 days and there is a QAI, there might even be two QAIs that are not in sync, but it's over 270 days. Is there a requirement that it be reported to the national database? You're muted, I think.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, that's correct. They need to be reported to the National Practitioner Data Bank.
And what's the penalty if it's not?
I'm
Nothing.
not sure. I don't think there is a penalty for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. You also referenced that in your review, you found selected facilities did not adhere to the DHA requirements for these 19 potentially compensable event reviews in two key areas. First, at the initiation of the reviews, the selected facilities did not document their consideration of whether to remove the providers from care and take adverse privileging action against any of the providers in your review. So it wasn't documented, and you have no reason to believe that there was action taken. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, based on our reviews, the only way, because we're reviewing documents, the only way that we know that any consideration was taken is that it needs to be documented, and it should be documented in the file. And for all of those reviews, we did not have any documentation of that consideration of taking an adverse privileging action or pulling that provider offline.
And whether it was actually a compensated event or a potentially compensable event, it should be documented. And there should be an effort made to assess whether or not the provider should be removed from providing care.
Exactly, because even the patient safety events that result in payment, they start out as a potential compensable event, so that consideration should always be taken.
All right, I thank you. I've exceeded my time. We will now thank all of our witnesses who have done a remarkable job under, I think, very painful circumstances. I think you've heard from every member on this committee that we are deeply troubled by the events. We're saddened by the loss of Danielle's life. It was a necessary loss of life. It was not a complicated set of circumstances. And to Mr. Del Barba, what you've endured is just unforgivable. And I just hope the rest of your life is everything you want it to be. And I hope by virtue of both of your experiences here today, that the military is going to recognize it has an obligation. It has an obligation to communicate with the families and the service member who've been injured or there's been a loss of life. There has to be more transparency, and we've got to make sure that we have quality care provided to our service members. It's just fundamental to everything that we believe in. So again, I thank you. We're now going to recess for just a few minutes to allow our next panel.
Excuse me, can I read this, please?
Mr. Lucky, yes?
I have this here. This is the Corpsman's Hospital Pledge. I solemnly swear myself before God and these witnesses. These corpsmen raised their right hand. I solemnly pledge myself before God and these witnesses to practice faithfully all of my duties as a member of the hospital corpsmen. I hold the care of the sick and injured to be a privilege and a secure trust, and I will assist the medical officers with loyalty and honesty. I will not knowingly permit harm to come to any patient. This is what they did to my daughter. I will not partake nor administer any unauthorized medication. I will hold all personal matters pertaining to the private lives of the patients in strict confidence. I dedicate my heart, my mind, and strength to work before me. I shall do all within my power to show myself an example of that is honorable and good throughout my naval career. My daughter's career was taken from her, while these people here continue with their lives in their career. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lucky. Thank you both. We are now going to welcome our second panel. Lieutenant General Ronald Place, Director of the Defense Health Agency, Lieutenant General R. Scott Dingle, Surgeon General of the Army, Rear Admiral Bruce Gillingham, Surgeon General of the Navy, Lieutenant General Robert I. Miller, Surgeon General of the Air Force. Welcome. Lieutenant General Place, do you want to begin?
Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Gallagher, distinguished members of this subcommittee, I'm honored to represent the Defense Health Agency and its dedicated military and civilian medical professionals in the military health system in describing our comprehensive enterprise approach to ensuring high quality of care in the military health system, the MHS. However, before doing so, I've added some handwritten comments, if I could, as I think it's important for me to address Mr. Del Barba and the Lucky family. Your testimony today was compelling and heartbreaking. It's clear that you've suffered tremendous losses, and I apologize for those losses. I take it very seriously when there are bad outcomes from the medical care provided within our system. I'm deeply committed to ensuring we learn from your losses so we can better our healthcare system, so we can have fewer losses, My goal is to make this health system stand as one of the finest, if not the finest in the nation. And those who serve their country should expect that. I say this not only as the leader of the Defense Health Agency, but as a husband, a father of 2 currently serving service members, and a grandfather whose family also receives their care in our system. You have my word. Madam Chairwoman, the DHA now exercises authority, direction, and control over all MTFs worldwide. Quality starts with the individual medical personnel we recruit and onboard every day. The credentialing and privileging process serves as the foundation for high quality and safe care by ensuring qualified and competent staff deliver care in a manner consistent with their education and training. The DHA oversees accreditation and certifications for hospitals and clinics, as well as specialty-specific certifications and quality assurance programs. In fact, the DoD participates in multiple civilian accreditation programs and is held to the same standards as our private sector healthcare colleagues. I'll mention just a few of those programs here, while my written testimony provides a more comprehensive list. The DHA manages an enterprise-level contract with the Joint Commission for all MTFs, and all DoD MTFs are fully accredited. At the specialty level, the MHS participates in numerous voluntary healthcare collaboratives that help drive improvement and allow us to compare our performance with others. These include the National Surgical Quality Improvement Program, NSQIP, a collaborative led by the American College of Surgeons, the National Perinatal Information Center, NPIC, a consortium of more than 80 health systems with high-volume obstetric care. The list goes on, from laboratories to blood banking, pharmacy programs, and so much more. For patient safety, our DHA programs similarly incorporate strategies and practices from the private sector and uses widely accepted measures for performance. Over the last 4 years, the DoD has seen improved patient safety performance. Again, specific performance improvements were noted in the testimony submitted by the department. While I'm confident in our processes for ensuring high-quality care and proud of our performance as measured against peers in American medicine, the department also has clear policies and procedures in place when patient safety incidents occur. The department has taken steps to methodically implement Section 731 of the FY 2020 NDAA, which amended the Military Claims Act by allowing members of the uniformed services or their representatives to file claims for compensation for personal injury or death caused by the medical malpractice of a DoD healthcare provider in an MTF. In those claims where a claimant disagrees with the determination, we have an appeals process with appeals board members who have no prior connection with the cases they're reviewing. In cases where a military medical malpractice claim, active duty disability, or death payment is made, additional reviews are required by the DHA headquarters, including an external peer review and specialty consultant review. Following these additional reviews, I am responsible for rendering a final provider determination and reporting decisions. The department is grateful for the support and oversight from this subcommittee on patient safety and quality of care programs in the military health system. We're confident that recent changes put in place within the MHS properly respond to both the spirit and letter of legislatively directed changes, and we'll continue to closely manage these vital programs on behalf of the service members and families we're privileged to serve. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today, and I look forward to your questions.
All right, Lieutenant General Dingell.
Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Gallagher, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you on behalf of our Army's health professionals. The committee's investment, combined with the Army's deliberate emphasis on patient safety, enhances medical readiness, and I thank you. I appreciate the first panel expressing their personal stories and testimonies. It resonated because people are our #1 priority. My unwavering commitment as the 45th Army Surgeon General is to ensure the health and safety of our soldiers and families first and foremost. Maintaining the confidence at military treatment facilities or at our operational sites requires a dedicated total Army medicine force. This is about taking care of our people. Together with the Defense Health Agency, we will accomplish these goals by focusing on advancing towards zero preventable harm in the delivery of medical care. As a key enabler, Army Medicine is committed to our high reliability organizational mission in the operational environment and the core competencies of patient safety. In conjunction with the Defense Health Agency, we are advancing towards zero preventable harm through training and oversight across the continuum of healthcare to maximize reduction of medical risks. Army medicine is also synchronized with the Defense Health Agency to meet the needs of the operational force. From the foxhole to the fixed facility, Army medicine follows one clinical quality management standard. The military department's operational units and the medical treatment facilities are inextricably linked. The medical treatment facility is the premier readiness platform for our medical personnel to hone and sustain the mission-essential clinical skills needed to perform their duties downrange. My enduring responsibility is unchanged to exercise my duties as the Army Secretary's senior medical advisor and medical integrator by certifying Army healthcare capabilities are trained and ready. Army medicine's focus has pivoted to the operational medicine, but we will ensure operational standards are in accordance with the policies, guidelines, and procedures. Patient safety is essential for a strong, healthy, and resilient Army, and is the most critical indicator of our readiness to deploy, fight, and win our nation's wars. In closing, Army medicine is committed to people first. We remain vigilant as we strive towards reduced preventable medical errors. I appreciate the subcommittee's work and the continued support to our soldiers, families, and your longstanding support to Army and Army medicine. Army medicine is Army strong. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Chairwoman Spear. First and most importantly, Mr. Lucky and Mr. Del Barba, thank you for your powerful testimony. I know this wasn't easy, and that we are grateful for the courage you demonstrated. I learned a lot listening to your statements, and as the leadership of the military health system, we needed to hear from you. To Mr. Lucky and the Lucky family, you suffered a profound loss with Danielle's tragic death. I know you continue to grieve. I want you to know that we, Danielle's Navy family, mourn her passing as well. The loss of a shipmate and family member is heartbreaking and impacts all of us who serve in America's Navy. Madam Chairwoman, Ranking Member Gallagher, members of the subcommittee, thank you for conducting this hearing on patient safety and quality of care. You rightfully hold us accountable to provide service members and families health care that is high quality, safe, and accessible. Please know we never waver from our commitment to protect the health of those who go in harm's way. As part of our solemn obligation to these sailors, Marines, and their families, we are continuing our strong commitment to high reliability within Navy medicine, appropriately in conjunction and collaboration with the Defense Health Agency, Army, and Air Force. High reliability practices are critical for success in high-risk Navy environments, such as submarines, aircraft carriers, and diving operations, in order to enable teams to avoid the detrimental impacts of mistakes. We have emulated their example within the military health system because we recognize that the 3 HRO pillars, leadership engagement, continuous process improvement, and a culture of safety, directly translate to better outcomes and the sustained delivery of high-quality patient care. For me, this commitment to HRO is deeply rooted in my early professional development. As a pediatric orthopedic surgeon, I was mentored by a highly regarded Navy orthopedist, Captain John Webster, who demonstrated high reliability in all aspects of patient care. In my view, he was ahead of his time in applying key principles of safety and quality in the operating room. But he also recognized that he couldn't do it alone. He knew that patient care and the relentless pursuit of better outcomes and fewer errors is interconnected and complex and involved teams of people working together in a culture of trust, cooperation, and mutual respect for a common purpose. And I should add, all empowered to speak up about issues impacting the safety of the care we deliver. I have seen the powerful impact of high reliability throughout my career. As a surgeon operating in commands such as Naval Medical Center San Diego, in combat, where I led a surgical shock trauma platoon in Taqadum, Iraq during the Second Battle of Fallujah, in command of military medical treatment facilities with large medical staffs, and as the fleet surgeon guiding the provision of care in the naval operational forces. Now, in my current role as the Navy Surgeon General, these experiences inspire me to broaden and deepen our efforts to eliminate preventable patient harm. For Navy medicine, high reliability represents a commitment to safety, quality, resiliency, and operational success wherever naval forces operate. To this end, we established the Navy Medicine Quality and Safety Leadership Academy, specifically equipped our leaders with HRO tools to communicate, anticipate, identify, resolve, and then ultimately rapidly share and apply the lessons through the enterprise. Our providers are expertly trained, and we hold them accountable for the care they provide. We do rigorous work, including provider credentialing, privileging, patient safety reporting, and other critical components, following the requirements specified in the DHA's Clinical Quality Management Program, as well as in compliance with other applicable Navy directives. We recognize that we cannot completely eliminate all errors, either human or systemic, but we must be persistent in our rigorous self-assessment, rapid cycle feedback, and high-velocity learning to continuously improve. As a high-reliability organization privileged to care for our nation's warfighters and their families, we can never be content. Chairwoman Spear, thank you for your leadership in this area. I look forward to your questions.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Gallagher, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. It's an honor and a privilege to appear before you today as the Surgeon General of the Air Force and Space Force to discuss Air Force medicine clinical quality management processes and functions to include patient safety and healthcare risk management. Before I continue, I also want to thank Mr. Del Barba and Mr. Lucky for their testimony. I want to reiterate my commitment to patient safety for all military health system beneficiaries. We started our journey towards becoming a high-reliability organization in 2015 when my predecessor, Lieutenant General Mark Edgar, launched the Trusted Care Program. Even now, high reliability remains the foundation for the care we provide. Additionally, we remain partnered with the Defense Health Agency's high-reliability efforts. Together, our processes ensure a culture and practice of safeguarding patient safety in the operational and non-operational environments. Today, I would like to highlight two aspects of that collaborative partnership towards quality and safe patient care. First, the AFMS's clinical quality management transition to the DHA, and second, the AFMS's operational quality program. Due to the DHA transition, the Air Force Medical Operations Agency Legacy Clinical Quality Management Office transitioned from a large organization that supported 76 military treatment facilities, all downrange facilities, and patient transport missions, to a streamlined office supporting the operational environment. Currently, our Clinical Quality Management Division falls within the Air Force Medical Readiness Agency, or AFMRA, and has been renamed AFMRA Operational Quality. This support now focuses on our deployed facilities and aeromedical transport capabilities. I'm happy to report the Air Force operational facilities comply with DHA Clinical Quality Management procedural manuals. Additionally, the Air Force quality policies have been updated to align with the DHA procedural manuals. The AFMRA Operational Quality Division is focused on development, implementation, and sustainment of clinical quality management procedures and guidance for safe and quality health care in operational environments. Our patient safety and healthcare risk management teams use proactive assessments to reduce risk and harm across the enterprise, as well as afford an analysis of events to identify gaps in healthcare delivery and mitigation strategies to prevent future harm. Mitigation and reduction of risk in the delivery of operational healthcare is paramount. Proactive management of safe and quality care includes review of joint patient safety reports from our downrange and patient transport environments to develop and improve processes to reduce the potential for harm in the deployed environment. Regardless of location, if a patient safety event occurs, the event is entered into the Joint Patient Safety Reporting System. These can be events that could have caused harm and did not reach the patient, or one that caused harm by reaching the patient. In either case, an event review occurs through an analysis of the healthcare delivery process with the aim of identifying the gaps that contributed to or directly caused the event. Additional healthcare risk management activities involve a review of the care that was delivered. If the standard of care review identifies potential misconduct, a significant deviation from the standard of care, or other significant concerns, then an adverse action to hold the involved provider accountable is pursued. In summary, the AFMS remains committed to being a high-reliability organization and is committed to maintaining the quality and safety of care delivered in the operational environment. Our program focuses on risk mitigation, transparency, and delivery of trusted care anywhere. We work hand in hand with the Defense Health Agency. A culture of learning and safety is paramount to the success of our operational quality program. Our AFMS team is working to ensure our airmen and guardians get the safe, high-quality health care they deserve, and I remain dedicated to safeguarding that diligence as their Surgeon General. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you all. I'll resist asking my questions until the end. Ranking Member Gallagher, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
And I would like to yield my time to the gentleman from Ohio, Dr. Winstrup.
Dr. Winstrup, you're recognized.
Thank
for
you,
5
Madam
minutes.
Chair, and thank you, Ranking Member, for the opportunity to participate in this today. And I want to thank our witnesses here today for being here. Personal privilege, if I can, General Dingell, I want to thank you for your opening up the opportunity for the service members to be able to converse with you by expansion of your consultant program. And I want to thank you for that. I think it's been a great opportunity for us and for Army medicine. You know, the MHS is a vital component of our national security strategy. There's no doubt about it. It needs to be. And the Defense Health Agency is a critical element of the MHS. It was established as part of a larger effort to reorganize military health care programs and services. We've learned a lot in the last couple of years as well. I think through COVID, population medicine is extremely important in the military. We need to preserve that. And there are concerns that Congress has tasked DHA with increasing responsibility despite it's being limited by its construct as an integrated combat support agency. And I've been working on this issue for several years now, you know, even after leaving this committee. But as a surgeon who served reserve and active, personal experiences as a surgeon, conversations I've had with active and retired officials, some that sat in your seats, experiences in private practice, grown some concerns with MHS transition. I think a lot of people have. Looking at further changes in the MHS, I think we need to ensure that we're able to provide what we often hear is a medically ready force and a ready medical force operationally, and all the while preserving population health for service members, their families, at home and abroad, retirees for that matter. So we want to make sure that we are not sacrificing readiness for population health and make sure that we can do the best of both. So through the experiences and listening to many stakeholders, I think that we could greatly benefit the MHS and all the patients in their care with a functional specified command is what I call it. And if I could, I would like to submit for the record some of what we have worked on involving the military health system and possible reforms to it. Certainly this isn't cut and dried, but it offers a specified command, a 3-star command, that I think would potentially make us all more functional across everything that we're trying to achieve. And I certainly would want input on that from each and every one of you, as I have sought some of that already, as you know. You know, I know that some of the concerns that we have came from Congress. And I remember at a hearing with previous Surgeon General, your predecessor, General Dingell, where we were discussing, one of the members was reading a letter from combatant commanders saying, this is going to be difficult for us, really challenged, so we're worried about this. And General West said, well, we're just doing what Congress asked us to do. And that's why I want to engage from this end, because if we're asking some things to do, maybe good intentions that aren't necessarily the best for us, you know, where do we go from there? And how do we make a difference to make your life easier and more productive in many ways? We want flexibility. We want the services to be able to weigh in across all compositions. We have joint situations. We have service-specific situations. Reserve flexibility. Are you backfill? Are you operational? Are you both? And certainly respecting the value of our MTFs, and I think that that's an important thing. So we want to enhance also opportunities between military and civilian operations where we can learn to train each other, and we see a lot more of that happening today, which I think has been very, very helpful.
I guess in the time that I have, I'll just go with one question. With the understanding that each service has unique needs, how would you describe or assess the level of ownership you have over the personnel and medical training readiness within each of your services?
Representative Winstrup, I'll start. From the Army, I own the soldiers. I'm responsible for their readiness, a trained and ready force. And I do that through what we call individual critical task lists. So for every specialty, I am responsible to make sure that that soldier can perform his or her duty, not just in the fixed facility where we sharpen the acumen, but also downrange in the operational environment. So I do have control over those soldiers to ensure the readiness, and in conjunction with the Defense Health Agency, I leverage internal training cross-Lebanon as well as military to civilian partnerships.
Thank you, Congressman. Similarly, in the Navy, my responsibility is command and control of all naval medical forces within our medical force, and the manning, training, and equipping of them to make sure they're ready to perform downrange. We have found that by establishing naval medical readiness training commands within the MTFs to oversee those responsibilities in conjunction with the DHA as a training range, that model is working well, albeit some growing pains, but we continue to collaborate with the DHA to make that successful.
Thank you, Congressman. And similar for the Air Force, I would say that as we focus on organized training and equipping our force, and especially our medics, our MTFs are our readiness planning training platforms. It's the focus. Sometimes we do need to go to civilian facilities as needed to supplement that training, but the preference is always to work within the military training facilities. That training starts at METC for our enlisted medics, different for the officers. And I would also like to comment that it's more than just the active duty, it's total force. It's the Guard, it's the reserves, and you put that whole team together, which is critical to make sure that we're delivering that trusted care across the globe.
As they mentioned, working with DHA, I think that's an important component of that conversation.
Yes, sir. As already indicated by the three surgeons, the services control the forces. We are in dialogue about how they might help within the MTFs, but the services control the forces.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas, Dr. Jackson, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to briefly say, as a relatively new member of Congress and new to this subcommittee as such, I'm looking for opportunities to make a difference. And I'll tell you, as the only physician on this subcommittee and as a career Navy emergency medicine physician, I think that this is an area, all these issues involving military medicine is going to be one of the main areas that I intend to focus on for my foreseeable future here in Congress on having a big impact. I just think that everybody needs to pick their niche. I think that this will become my niche in this subcommittee. And so I say that because I was just looking, and per last year's budget, almost 8% of the DoD funding was dedicated to the military health systems. That's quite a lot. And I've been trying to, figure out where can I make an impact in military medicine. And I start by saying that I'm not doing it to shake anything up or to identify any problems. I'm doing it as somebody who comes from your community to find ways that I can help you make military medicine better for all of us. Because just like General Place was saying, I too have family members, including a son and a daughter-in-law that are on active duty as well. And I want their career to be fulfilling, and I want them to get the medical care that they need in the process and be ready to fight and do what they have to do as well. So I approach it in that regard, and I've had the honor to spend a little time with General Miller, and I really enjoyed that, sir. And I think I think you've got a great attitude, and I think we're going to work together well. And I'm going to enjoy working with you. I personally know Admiral Gillingham pretty well, and he's an aggressive and well-respected leader in Navy medicine. I hope to get to know the two of you a little bit better as time goes on. But my question would be, I guess, in general, I'm trying to figure out exactly where we're at in the general process, because I was on active duty back in 2012, 2013, whenever DHA came about, and the branches were trying to figure out where everybody fit in and how it was all going to work. And I know it was a mess to start with, and you would assume that it would be with an organization the size of military healthcare, trying to come together and just completely restructure. I know that there were some growing pains early on. I'm assuming that a lot of that stuff's been overcome. I have been going out and trying to be active and figure out exactly where I can have an impact and what's broken and what I can help fix from here. And I've been to San Diego, I've been to Walter Reed, I've been out to Brooke Army Medical Center. So I'm making my rounds, and I'm going to continue to do that. I'm going to continue to visit as many MTFs, clinics, and things as I can. To continue to ask people what's working, what's not working. As a member of Congress, what would you like to see me work on? What would you like to see me help you fix, so on and so forth. But I ask you guys that as well, and I'm sure that the stuff that comes to your level might be different than the stuff that's happening, with the folks that are on the ground. Some of the doctors and nurses that are, directly taking care of patients. But I will say that, I still think that there's a little bit when I talk to folks, and I'm hoping that, try to disarm people as much as you possibly can when you go into these situations, especially. I don't think of myself as a congressman, quite honestly, at this particular point. When I get back in the military MTF, I feel like, this is where I've been for the last 25 years. I don't feel like, I'm out of place, but I think a lot of people are hesitant to talk to me about certain things. And I get a lot of people that are just like, well, everything's fine. We don't need any help, but I get the sense that everything might not be completely fine. There may be issues, but I don't know what they are. So my question to you all to start with would be, what's working and what's not working with the transition, and what, as a member of Congress on this subcommittee that deals with military health, can I do to help you guys facilitate your efforts to make military medicine as absolutely, to make it the absolute best that it can possibly be?
Well, Representative Jackson, thanks for the discussion and the question. Knowing how all the process works, the legislative proposals have, they're working their way through OMB, and you'll see them. I think all of us will say that we're working way better today than we did a year ago, and I think we'll say that we're working way better a year ago than we were 3 years ago, and way better 3 years ago than we were 5 years ago. So I think you'll see a united organization here between all of us and the organizations that we lead. I think that the best discussions are often held informally as a methodology of organizational ideas exchanging. So I think I speak for myself when saying I look forward to getting to know you a little bit better as well, and how we can have those discussions. But I don't have specific things that I'd recommend that you address today along those lines.
And Representative Jackson, I would add that we are not where we were, and we are moving the ball down the field. However, there are challenges that we are learning, and so we're in the assessment phase because this is new. We, as a team, from the director and all the surgeon generals working together to implement the law as well as DOD policy, we are learning, discovery learning as we go through, to include the initial question from Representative Winstrup about readiness, and as I assess the readiness of soldiers. And so I too welcome, the discussion. At the same time, imperative that we give the opportunity to do a detailed assessment, internal as well as external. And then, as General Place mentioned, we are using the legislative proposal process through the Department of Defense for the initial ones.
Thank you, Congressman Jackson, for that question. I would say, you asked specifically what's working. I think COVID taught us the power of our unified approach. The DHA did a terrific job interacting in the interagency, particularly as we got ready for vaccine distribution. And then working closely with them, we were able to translate that into our unique operational environments. I think that rapid cycle feedback that General Place has spoken about in terms of the practice management guidelines for the treatment of COVID, which is now in its 8th edition, demonstrates the power of having a large central organization that can collate that experience and then allow us to execute through our respective services. So I too welcome the opportunity. I think we'll be speaking next week. I look forward to that, sir, and appreciate your support and advocacy.
The gentleman's time has expired. All right. Let me start off with Admiral Gillingham. You heard Mr. Lucky talk about the loss of his daughter. What have we learned from the loss of her life? What has the Navy done differently because she received such incompetent care?
Thank you for that question, Madam Chairwoman. I can assure you that Navy medicine investigated the facts and circumstances surrounding Seaman Lucky's medical care, that we examined lapses in systems and protocols, that we made standard of care determinations, but that we developed improved processes, not just aboard USS Reagan, but we shared those throughout the fleet and across our medical treatment facilities and with the DHA, and that we have addressed the accountability of the involved care providers. We have grown as an organization due to that unfortunate tragic loss.
Can you be specific about what changes have been made in terms of providing medical care on ships?
Certainly. We developed a fleet-wide sepsis screening. So when an individual comes to sick call aboard ship, the corpsman can use that screening tool to detect whether there are risk factors for that individual to develop sepsis. In addition, then, the treatment protocol that follows should sepsis be identified. And that has also been shared with our MTFs. We implemented a process we call SURGE, which is supporting urgent responses across the global enterprise. These are reviews that go to a site if there's been an event, even potentially near misses, so that we can learn the maximum from those cases and apply that. And we also have deployed the Joint Patient Safety Reporting System across the fleet and in all of our operational environments.
Thank you. Lieutenant General Dingell, since Mr. Del Barba's incident, what changes has the Army made in how they care for service members and training units?
Representative Spear, again, not to repeat what Rear Admiral Gillingham said, we have conducted all of those investigations in conjunction with the Defense Health Agency, the lessons learned, the clinical practical guidelines, not just at that location, but across the military health system. We work through and with the Defense Health Agency because it is...
Well, I understand all of that. I want to know what you've done differently. What's pretty clear to me is that the likelihood for whether it's strep or sepsis is much more likely in a setting where you have people living very close together. It appeared that in the case of Fort Benning, there wasn't enough antibiotics to provide to the other service members. So how are you anticipating that?
Representative Spear, if I can take that for record, I could give you much more detail in the numbers in what we have done as I synchronize that with the Defense Health Agency.
All right, in all of your settings, spinal meningitis is much more prevalent and spreads much more quickly in living situations where people are close together. It happens in college campuses, and it can happen in a setting where you're on a ship or in close quarters in a barracks. Have all of the service members, upon participating in basic training, receiving the actual shot? I guess it's a vaccine, I'm not sure.
Yes, ma'am. Penicillin. Yes, ma'am. We have it started administering that at our bases.
I'm sorry, you started doing that?
Ma'am, we had stopped for a period at that location and then re-implemented through a lesson learned from this incident.
So are all basic training recruits actually receiving that kind of a vaccine?
Yes, ma'am, penicillin.
And how about in the Navy?
Yes, ma'am, to my knowledge, we are doing that.
General Miller, Air Force?
Yes, ma'am, also.
All right. General Place, in your opening comments, you referenced the goal of the DHA is ready, reliable care. And that struck me kind of oddly. Reliable is not quality. Reliable is not comprehensive. Reliable arguably could be 3 minutes in the ER. So why is that word used versus one that kind of emphasizes quality?
The use of the word reliability is taken from high reliability concepts to become a high reliability organization. And the tenets of high reliability is where that word is coming from.
Well, I would recommend that you reevaluate that. You've all heard about the GAO study. It's preliminary in nature. The one question I didn't ask Ms. Silas is, what grade would you give these services based on the fact that 16% of the credentials of the healthcare professionals are never verified, never confirmed? Now that falls under you, Lieutenant General Place. That's your responsibility. You can delegate it, but the fact that 16% haven't been looked at should send alarms. Does it not send alarms to you?
Congressman, the alarm is always on. I mean, the depth and breadth of the requirements that the GAO study is looking at is significant. And quite honestly, I'll agree with the preliminary results that she described to you. I think those are accurate. But I'm not sure that the characterization that you're making is as accurate as it could be. And here's why I'm saying that. One of the examples, and I happen to know some of the preliminary results that she was describing, when it came to licensing, the specific case that she's talking about, that particular provider had 10 licenses. 10. And 8 of them were primary source verified. Now, is the requirement to do all of them? The answer is yes. Should we have done better? The answer is yes. But I wouldn't infer from that there's no checking for the licensure of the providers.
Well,
that
I
would be
mean,
accurate.
the fact of the matter is, and I wish she was still here, there were 100 cases pulled at 4 installations. And of those 100 records, 16 of them had not been verified. Now, in this one, you're referencing that 8 of the 16 licensures had been of this one person. But I think the expectation is that we're not credentialing, we are not allowing anyone to provide health care to our service members unless we have verified their credentials. So if you need more staff, then you should tell us. Do you need more staff to complete that function?
At this point, I think it'd be premature to say that. And that gets back to the other comment that she mentioned, the quality requirements that we have now, that I signed out as one of my first acts as the director of the Defense Health Agency in October of 2019, was a marked expansion of the clinical quality requirements, massive. And we are still in the process of implementing all of them perfectly. And quite frankly, I think the help of the GAO to help us see ourselves better where we're not meeting those expectations. My expectation is to be perfect.
Okay, so she's also said very clearly that if a QAI takes more than 270 days, you're supposed to report it to the National Practitioners Data Bank. Have you done that in all of these cases?
No, ma'am, not in all these cases.
And why not?
Part of the reason, the clock starts when the payment is made, not when we find out about it.
No, that's not right. That is actually not right. It starts on day 270, whether you've completed the QAI or not.
I understand that.
And there are cases where you do not compensate, but they are compensatable, but have not been reviewed for whether or not that practitioner should no longer be providing services. I think we're all interested in the same thing. We don't want practitioners out there providing services to our service members who either need more training or have forgotten their training or just are not good physicians or healthcare professionals. Correct?
Yes, ma'am. Agreed.
So it seems like we should be checking their credentials. We should be reporting it to this data bank. And we should be evaluating whether or not they should be put on administrative leave pending the results of the cases. I mean, when a police officer shoots his gun and someone dies or is injured, they're immediately put on administrative leave while there is an investigation that's undertaken. In many of these cases, these practitioners continued to practice, and some were even promoted, correct?
I don't know the details of all the cases we're describing, but I can see how that would happen. Yes, ma'am.
All right. So my understanding is that whatever the GAO report finalizes, you are going to embrace it and you're going to make the changes necessary to comply with it.
Absolutely, yes, ma'am.
The personnel performing these QAIs, how are they selected? How do you ensure their independence from command influence or personal loyalties within their unit?
Is that a question for me?
Yes.
They're not at part of units. The headquarters people that I have are not associated with units.
Okay, so the question is, how do you guarantee that this kind of review that's being done is by persons that are independent from different facilities, don't know the provider that's being reviewed? How do you make sure there's not a conflict of interest?
Well, exactly as you described it. First, they're not part of the same unit, and the panel that we use within our headquarters is not associated with the healthcare being delivered. Similarly, we use a commercial program, a commercial company, as an independent second opinion for these cases, as another independent way of evaluating them.
So when do you send cases for external reviews? What's the status? What's the determination that's made?
If the local level says status or standard of care met, then those go to an external peer review.
If standards are met?
If we say internally in our evaluation that the standard of care is met, those are the ones that are sent to an external peer review. So it's not just, well, we all got together and you know, we're all together here, so nothing to see here. If we determine internally that standard of care is met, then we send it to an external peer review.
Okay. How many QAIs has the department completed over the past 3 years?
Ma'am, because of Title X, I can't tell you that in this forum. I'm happy to provide that to you offline as your status as chairwoman.
Okay, would you do that, please?
Yes, ma'am.
And then also provide to us how many found that the standard of care was not met, and how many providers were reported to the National Practitioners Data Bank for failing to meet the standard of care?
Yes, ma'am. I'll give it to your staff for the specific questions. We'll provide that.
All right. Those are my questions. Anything else anyone wants to add? All right. We thank you very much for your service and for being here today. We've got to get this right. Those two results are untenable. I think you appreciate that. I hope that you will redouble your efforts. With that, we stand adjourned.